Have you ever been lying in bed, completely fine, having a perfectly normal night, and then out of nowhere your brain decides to reach back 10 years and hand you the most embarrassing moment of your life? Like, it just thought, hey, remember that time you waved back at someone who wasn't actually waving at you? Remember that? Let's think about that for a while. And suddenly, you're wide awake, cringing so hard your toes curl, replaying something that happened so long ago that the people involved have probably forgotten you exist, but you haven't forgotten. You remember every detail. The exact words you said, the look on someone's face, the way you tried to recover and somehow made it worse. And the bizarre thing is, you don't just remember it, you feel it. The embarrassment hits just as fresh as it did the first time. So, what is going on? Why does the brain do this? Why does it hold on to these moments like they're somehow still relevant? Today, we're going to break all of that down, and I want to warn you up front. Some of what we're going to cover is going to feel uncomfortably accurate. But by the end of this video, I think you're going to walk away seeing this habit in a completely different light. Number one, your brain files embarrassing memories differently than other memories. Let's start at the beginning, because the first thing you need to understand is that your brain doesn't treat all memories equally. It has a filing system, and embarrassing moments go into a very specific drawer. When something emotionally charged happens, especially something that involves social judgment, your brain's emotional processing center, a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala gets involved. The amygdala essentially acts like a highlighter. It marks certain memories as important, as worthy of attention, as things you should probably keep close to the surface. Now, why would embarrassment trigger that response? The answer goes back a lot further than you might expect. Humans are one of the most social species on the planet. We evolved in groups, and for the vast majority of human history, being part of a group wasn't optional. It was survival. If you were rejected, if you were cast out, if the group turned on you, your chances of making it dropped dramatically. So the brain evolved to take social threats very seriously. An embarrassing moment at a deep biological level registers as a social threat. You did something that might have damaged how others see you. And so the brain tags it. It stores it carefully. It keeps it accessible. It wants to make sure you remember it so you don't repeat it. The frustrating irony is that this system evolved for a world where the social stakes were life and death. You're not being judged by a tribe of people whose approval you literally need to survive. You're remembering that time you laughed at something that wasn't a joke in a work meeting. But your brain doesn't make that distinction. It just knows. Social threat, keep this one close. So when that memory surfaces at midnight, for no apparent reason, your brain isn't broken. It's overzealous. It did exactly what it was built to do. It just never got the update that the danger has passed. Number two, you're running a social simulation engine and the simulation never finished. Here's something fascinating about how the brain processes experience. It doesn't just record what happened, it runs simulations. After a significant social event, especially one that didn't go the way you hoped, the brain goes back and replays it. And the purpose of that replay isn't to torture you, even though it can feel that way. The purpose is to extract information. Think of it like a sports coach reviewing game footage. You go back through the play, you identify the moment things went wrong, and you figure out what to do differently. That's genuinely useful. That's how learning happens. So after an embarrassing moment, the brain starts a simulation. It wants to understand the event. It wants to process it from multiple angles. It wants to figure out whether there's a lesson to take away. And then, ideally, it wants to close the file, mark it as processed, and move on. But here's where the problem starts. Most embarrassing moments don't have clean endings. They end abruptly. The conversation moved on. You left the room. You laughed it off awkwardly and changed the subject. You never got to fully recover or explain yourself or reach any kind of resolution. And so the simulation keeps running. The brain is still looking for the ending that never came. It's still trying to figure out how that situation should have gone. And until it finds something that feels like a resolution, it keeps the file open and keeps coming back to it. Sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, sometimes at 2 in the morning when you were just trying to sleep. Number three, you have a higher than average self-monitoring instinct, and that's actually a strength. Now, here's something worth paying attention to, because this is where it starts to get personal. Not everyone does this equally. You might have friends who seem to do something embarrassing and genuinely shake it off within about 30 seconds. And then there's you, lying awake revisiting a moment from 2013. And it can be tempting to see that as a flaw, to think there's something wrong with you for not being able to let things go. But the research tells a different story. Psychologists study something called self-monitoring, which refers to how closely a person tracks their own social behavior and how they're being perceived by others. High self-monitors are the people who are naturally tuned in. They pick up on subtle cues. They notice when someone's expression shifts. They think about how their words are landing while they're still speaking. They care genuinely and deeply about how they're coming across. And here's the thing, high self monitors are also the people who tend to replay embarrassing moments most intensely. The two go hand in hand, because if you're someone who pays close attention to social dynamics, you're going to feel the misfires more acutely. The same sensitivity that makes you notice other people's discomfort also makes you hyper aware of your own social mistakes. And yes, that can be exhausting. But high self monitors tend to be more socially perceptive, more empathetic, more adaptable in social situations, and better at maintaining relationships over the long run. The replay habit isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. One, it's the side effect of being someone who genuinely pays attention to other people. The discomfort is real, but it's not a flaw. It's the cost of caring. Number 4, the memory stayed open because you never gave it a narrative ending. There's a concept in psychology that I find genuinely fascinating, and once you know about it, you start seeing it everywhere. It's called the Zeigarnik Effect, named after a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik. In the 1920s, she noticed something curious. Waiters could hold incredibly detailed orders in their heads while the meal was being prepared, keeping track of every item for every table. But the moment the food was delivered and the table was settled, they forgot the order almost instantly. It wasn't that their memory was bad. It was that the brain actively holds on to unfinished things and releases things that are complete. She went on to study this more formally and found that people remember interrupted or unfinished tasks significantly better than completed ones. The brain keeps unresolved things in an active, accessible state because it's waiting for closure. It's essentially keeping the file open until the task is done. Embarrassing memories work exactly the same way. If you never made sense of what happened, if you never arrived at some kind of conclusion about it, the brain treats it as unfinished business, and it keeps pulling it back up. Not to hurt you, but because it's genuinely waiting for you to process it. Something as simple as telling yourself a narrative that wraps it up can actually be enough. Something like, I was anxious that day and said the wrong thing, and that happens to everyone. Or, that moment was genuinely awkward, and I handled it as well as I could at the time. Those kinds of closures signal to the brain that the file is done. You don't need to keep it active. And in a lot of cases, once you give the memory a real ending, it loses most of its grip on you. It becomes just a memory, instead of an open loop that keeps pulling you back. Number 5. The memories that replay hardest usually touch something deeper than the surface moment. Think about all the awkward or embarrassing things that have ever happened to you. There are probably dozens, maybe hundreds. Most of them you barely remember. A handful of them replay constantly. Why the difference? Why do some embarrassing moments fade and others stick around for years? The answer almost always comes down to identity. The moments that replay the hardest aren't just embarrassing, they graze something central to how you see yourself or how you want to be seen. Your intelligence, your competence, your social ease, your likability, your sense of belonging. When an embarrassing moment bumps into one of those things, it doesn't stay on the surface. It sinks in because now it's not just a story about something that went wrong, it's a data point about who you are. If you tripped and spilled something, that's mildly embarrassing and your brain will probably let it go relatively quickly. But if you said something in a meeting and realized too late that it revealed a gap in your knowledge and you care deeply about being seen as competent, that memory has somewhere to anchor. It connects to something that matters. And so it stays. It replays. It comes back. Not because your brain is cruel, but because the question it raised, am I actually as capable as I think I am, was never fully answered. The memory isn't really about the incident anymore. It's about the identity question underneath it. And that's the thing that keeps it alive. Number 6, your inner critic collects these memories and files them as evidence. Here's something worth understanding about the way the inner critic operates. A lot of people picture the inner critic as this irrational voice that just randomly attacks them, but it's actually more methodical than that. The inner critic builds a case. It gathers evidence. It maintains a filing system of moments that seem to support its argument. Okay? And embarrassing memories from years ago are exactly the kind of material it loves to use. So here's what tends to happen. You're doing something that makes you feel a little vulnerable. Maybe you're about to send an important email. Maybe you're walking into a social situation where you don't know many people. Maybe you're trying something new and there's a chance you'll fail in front of others. And right at that moment, the inner critic reaches back and pulls out Exhibit A. Remember that time in 2012 when you completely embarrassed yourself in front of everyone. Remember how that felt? And suddenly, the old memory isn't just a memory. It's being actively used in a current argument about whether you're capable or likable or good enough. The key thing to notice here is that this process is not random. The inner critic is strategic. It doesn't bring up that old embarrassing memory when you're feeling confident and relaxed. It saves it for the moments when you're already feeling uncertain. And once you see that pattern, you can start to respond to it differently. You can recognize that the memory being surfaced right now is old evidence being recycled for a new argument. And you can ask yourself whether that evidence actually holds up, whether one awkward moment from a decade ago really says anything meaningful about who you are today. And when you look at it honestly, the answer is almost always no. Number 7, people who do this are actually processing more deeply than those who don't. You are a person who processes deeply. You don't just let experiences wash over you and move on without thinking about them. You examine what happened, you sit with it, you try to understand it. And yes, sometimes that process feels like torture at 2 in the morning, but it's not nothing. It's not a malfunction. The people who replay embarrassing memories tend to be the same people who grow the most from social mistakes. Not because they're harder on themselves, but because they actually pay attention. They notice what went wrong. They think about what they could have done differently. They carry that awareness forward. Over time, the same sensitivity that creates the cringe is the thing that makes someone genuinely thoughtful in how they show up for others. The discomfort is real. I'm not going to tell you that lying awake, replaying something embarrassing is a pleasant experience because it isn't. But the alternative, simply not caring, not reflecting, not noticing, comes at its own cost. The people who never replay their mistakes often don't learn from them either. You're not stuck in the past, you're processing it. And there is a real and meaningful difference between those two things. So the next time your brain pulls up something you'd rather forget, try to give it a little credit. It's not trying to hurt you. In its own strange, overzealous, evolutionarily ancient way, it's still trying to help you figure things out. And if you can meet it there, acknowledge the memory, give it a real ending, and recognize what it's actually about, a lot of the time it will finally let you go.